All right, so here's another question we're going to answer right quick is what happens after a due process loss? Which, of course, the person asking this is like, well, I've searched high and low. There's really nothing out there to sit there and explain after you go through due process and there's a decision. And let's say you lose, what ends up happening? And hold on, let me look. Nothing. Okay, the school district is still responsible to provide a FAPE. The only thing that happened is that the hearing officer did not agree that whatever the issues that you raised and brought at that particular hearing reached a level of substantive violation of the law. It doesn't negate or nullify the school district's responsibility to provide the FAPE. That's still there. And in fact, your rights with regards to being able to file again in the future are intact, and you could go back to the drawing. You just can't go back and have a hearing on the same issues and during that same period of time, which of course ends on the date, that you file a due process complaint. So the date that you filed a due process complaint, it would be that time moving backwards that you wouldn't be able to argue again. But any time after that due process filing, it's a whole new possible area where you have and maintain your rights to be able to challenge the decisions of the IEP team in the school district. Okay, that's if your argument is that they failed to provide your child a FAPE because your child regressed, stagnated, and didn't make tangible, measurable progress. That's on that. But let's say you file due process because your child was eligible and they determined that your child no longer required specialized instruction. Well, if you lose on that, then no, you would, once again, in the future, your child could be eligible again. All right. It's an ongoing fluid process. So what ends up happening is it eliminates or alleviates or eliminates your ability to file due process again on what you argued and lost on. Okay. It doesn't prevent and you have your rights moving forward. Okay. Always remember that. So you're not really losing anything. It's not a death penalty case. All right. It's just a due process dispute resolution. And I think a lot of parents turn it into more than it needs to be. All right. So let's say on eligibility, that's what would happen. Your child would probably have a 504 plan for equal access and accommodations, not necessarily specialized instruction. But if your child starts nosediving and there's data collection to support that, you can always ask for another evaluation. It is not just a complete bar of your child to be considered in the future for another IEP. Okay, let's say it's a placement change where they change your placement and it's a more restrictive setting. At that time, then yes, if you lose your due process case, that IEP that let's say you had stay put on would now be implemented, meaning that whatever placement determination that the IEP team determined, even though you objected and went to due process on, if you lose on that situation, yes, that IEP that had been temporarily stayed due to stay put would now be the one implemented, which means that your child would be in a more restrictive setting. That's what would happen. At the same time, once again, FAPE is an ongoing duty long into the future, which means that the data collection starts all over again. And you maintain and have always maintained your rights moving forward from that point, which means potentially, if the data collection is supporting that something else needs to be considered and whatever placement they put your child in where you lost on your due process challenge, if it ends up to where the data collection is not showing that your child is making tangible, measurable progress in that environment, then there you go. Boom. Now you have your data collection. Now you've tried and been forced to try because you lost your due process case. That new restrictive setting, you now have right later down the road when you have sufficient information and data collection to support that your child stagnated, regressed, and did not make tangible, measurable progress in that environment to make another challenge. You are not barred from that. This is a fluid, ongoing process. Okay. You always maintain your rights moving forward. The only thing that happens for due process, guys, is everything moving backwards 2 years, depending on your statute of limitations. Louisiana, North Carolina, it's 1 year, but moving backwards, it's a 2-year review, potentially. That's what it is. From the date that you file due process, moving backwards, does not impede or obstruct your rights moving forward. It is simply an analysis and a review of what the school had done under the current IEP and prior IEPs on whether or not FAPE was provided, whether or not least restrictive environment is correct, whether or not eligibility and evaluations were correct. Those are all areas where you can file a due process complaint. But if you lose, yeah, you might lose, but at the same time, this is a dispute resolution process. It is not some high stakes drama that you see on TV or anything else. It is intended to be more of a relaxed type of setting. And, of course, we do everything in our power to avoid even needing a hearing. And that's why we focus on solutions at resolution or a mediation or through negotiations with the district to reach that middle ground of solutions that work for our clients to avoid a hearing altogether. Now, why would we want to avoid a hearing? Because it puts us in the driver's seat. We remain in the driver's seat with regards to solutions instead of handing those decisions over to a hearing officer that could do whatever they want at the end of the hearing. They can award you with whatever you're asking for, but they're not required to do that. They can award what they think is permissible under the law, which is frequently not what I would recommend, or frequently not what the parents are asking. Okay, so it's always good to maintain control over the final solutions and what you're trying to achieve for the child. Always better. Okay, which means that the focus should be on dispute resolution at that level. And are you going to get everything you want? No, you shouldn't. This is why it's a negotiation. That's why you have to give and take. That is the part of humanity to where you remain civil in a society when you're able to effectively communicate, negotiate, and come to a middle ground. That hurts a little bit for both of you. All right? That's where you know you've made progress. That's actually how you know you have a good agreement, is when you don't get everything. Because at that point, you can sit there and identify where you can sit there and blend and how it will work. And I will always think through that process. And we'll come to here, even if I think it might take one or two more steps to get us to that optimal point. But it's faster for me to do it that way and get to that optimal point than to sit there and be hard-headed and go to a hearing over something to where if I know that if I just think through the problem, if I think through it and set things up as we need to, we can get to that optimal through the natural process of the IEP team. Okay? So it all depends on how you're thinking through this. But that's what happens in due process losses. Okay? And, some of it seems severe, guys. It seems outrageous. But at the end of the day, if it is some of those things that are extreme to where you vehemently disagree with placement change, for example, guys, you always have the opportunity to unenroll your child. All right? They don't own your child. You can unenroll and you can go a different route. You can do that. And I've seen parents do that. Okay, it sort of depends on the level of need and severity of your child, but that is an option. They don't own your child. They can't force you to do these things. This entire process revolves around consent, your consent for them to be able to do those things. Okay, so even with those extreme situations that are rare, you're still in the driver's seat. Is it optimal? Is it something that you wanted? No, but sometimes that's the reality for some of us. And even then, there are still options, but we're not going to discuss it here in this format.